I'd always thought my life with Emily was something solid, unbreakable, like a house built on stone. We'd been married for 12 years, and I'd spent every one of those years believing she was my anchor. She was beautiful in that effortless way, with dark hair that fell in waves and eyes that seemed to hold secrets I'd never quite unravel. We lived in a quiet suburb, the kind where neighbors waved over picket fences and kids rode bikes until the streetlights flickered on. I worked as a project manager, steady and predictable, while Emily ran a small boutique downtown, selling handmade jewelry and vintage dresses. It was a good life, or so I thought. The first hint came on a Tuesday in late March. I'd come home early from the office, a rare break from the grind, and found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone with a look I couldn't place. Half smile, half something else. She didn't hear me come in, didn't notice me standing there in my loafers, still clutching my briefcase. "Hey, Em," I said, and she jolted, shoving the phone into her pocket like it was a live grenade. "You okay?" I asked, laughing it off. She nodded, too quickly, and said she'd just been texting a supplier about a late shipment. I believed her because why wouldn't I? Trust was the mortar in our foundation. But that moment stuck with me, a splinter under my skin. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things, little cracks in the facade. She'd take calls in the other room, her voice low and clipped, or she'd come home later than usual, blaming inventory or a chatty customer. Once, I caught her brushing her hair in the bathroom, humming a tune I didn't recognize, and when I asked about it, she said it was just something she'd heard on the radio. I didn't push. I didn't want to. Emily was my wife, my partner, and doubt felt like a betrayal of its own. It wasn't until I found the receipt that the splinter became a blade. I was cleaning out the car, our shared SUV, cluttered with coffee cups and grocery bags, when I pulled a crumpled slip of paper from under the passenger seat. It was from a cafe I'd never heard of, 40 miles out of town, dated a week ago. The total was for 2 coffees and a pastry, paid in cash. I sat there in the driveway, the engine still ticking as it cooled, staring at that receipt like it was a riddle. Emily had said she'd been at the boutique all day that Thursday. I remembered because I'd called her at lunch, and she'd sounded distracted, rushed. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I tucked the receipt into my wallet and waited, letting the unease fester. Days turned into weeks, and I became a man obsessed, though I hid it well. I'd smile at Emily over breakfast, pour her coffee, kiss her forehead before work, all while my mind churned. Who was she with at that cafe? Was it a friend? A client? I told myself it could be innocent, but the late nights kept piling up, and her excuses grew thinner. "The shop's been crazy," she'd say. Or, "I had to meet someone about a custom order." I nodded, played the good husband, but I started checking things, her phone bill, her calendar, the mileage on the car. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. One night, she came home smelling different. Not perfume, not soap, just a faint, unfamiliar scent, like leather and smoke. She brushed past me, claiming exhaustion, and went straight to bed. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter, that smell lingering in the air like an accusation. The next morning, I did something I'd never imagined. I followed her. I took a sick day, parked 2 streets over from the boutique, and watched. She left at noon, not in her usual jeans and blouse, but a dress I hadn't seen before, red, bold, clinging to her like a second skin. She didn't head to the bank or the post office. She drove out of town, and I trailed her, my heart pounding against my ribs. She pulled into a gravel lot beside a diner, the kind with neon signs and faded paint. I parked across the street, hidden by a row of pines, and watched as a man stepped out of a black truck. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that looked carved from granite. Someone I didn't know. Emily got out, and they didn't shake hands or wave. She walked straight into his arms, and he pulled her close, his hands sliding down her back. My stomach twisted. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, watching them disappear inside. I didn't move. I just sat there, the world tilting under me. I didn't confront her that day. I drove home, numb, and waited for her to walk through the door with another lie. She did, right on cue, claiming she'd been at a fabric supplier's all afternoon. I nodded, poured her a glass of wine, and asked about her day like nothing was wrong. Inside, I was a storm. Rage, hurt, disbelief swirling together. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering how long this had been going on, who this man was, what he had that I didn't. The next step was inevitable. I needed proof, something concrete to hold on to when I finally faced her. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled guy named Paul with a smoker's cough and a no-nonsense stare. I gave him the receipt, the diner's address, everything I'd seen. "Give me a week," he said, and I handed over a wad of cash, feeling like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. While I waited, I kept up the charade. Dinners together, small talk, even a movie night where she curled against me like nothing had changed. It was torture, but I needed her to think I was still in the dark. Paul called me 6 days later. "Got what you need," he said, and we met in a dingy bar on the edge of town. He slid a manila envelope across the table, and I opened it with trembling hands. Photos spilled out, Emily and the man whose name was apparently Ryan, a contractor from the next county. There they were, laughing outside the diner, her hand on his chest. Another shot showed them at a motel, his arm around her waist as they slipped into room 12. The final photo was the worst. Them in his truck, her head tilted back, his mouth on her neck. I stared until my vision blurred, then shoved the pictures back into the envelope. "You sure?" I asked. Paul nodded. "Caught him 3 times. Same pattern." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I went home and sat in my office, the envelope on my desk, and let the anger harden into something cold and sharp. Emily wasn't just stepping out. She was living a whole other life, one where I didn't exist. Ryan wasn't some fling. He was a fixture, a rival I hadn't known I had. Couldn't let it stand. Divorce wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel what I felt: betrayal, humiliation, the gut punch of losing everything you thought was yours. I started planning. Revenge isn't impulsive. It's deliberate, a craft. First, I dug into Ryan. Paul gave me the basics: 42, divorced, owned a small construction business. I went further, scouring public records, social media, anything I could find. He had a daughter, a teenage girl living with his ex-wife, and a reputation for charm that bordered on sleaze. I filed that away. Then I turned to Emily. I needed leverage, something to twist the knife when the time came. I remembered her boutique, her pride, her passion. It wasn't just a business. It was her identity. If I could take that, I'd take a piece of her soul. I spent nights awake, plotting. I'd expose her, but not just to me, to everyone. Her friends, her family, her customers. I'd dismantle her world, brick by brick, and Ryan's too. I started small, gathering evidence. Texts I'd hacked from her phone, receipts, the photos. I opened a secret bank account, siphoning money from our joint savings, preparing for the fallout. I wasn't sure how far I'd go, but I knew it wouldn't be gentle. She'd chosen this. She'd lit the match. Now I'd burn it all down. The boutique was my opening move. Emily had a big event coming up, a spring showcase, her chance to impress local influencers and drum up business. She'd been buzzing about it for weeks, oblivious to my simmering rage. I waited until the night before, when she was out running errands, with Ryan, no doubt, and made my move. I'd kept a spare key to the shop, one she didn't know about. At midnight, I let myself in, the bell above the door jingling softly in the dark. I didn't trash the place, that was too crude. Instead, I rearranged everything. I swapped price tags, putting dollar store values on her high-end pieces. I hid her best displays in the stockroom and replaced them with tacky, outdated stock she'd meant to toss. I spilled coffee on her ledger, smudging the ink into illegible streaks. Then I took the photos from Paul, dozens of them printed large, and taped them to the walls, the counter, the dressing room mirrors. Emily laughing with Ryan, Emily kissing Ryan, Emily in that red dress, her secret life laid bare. I left a note on the register: "Enjoy the show." I locked up and went home, adrenaline surging. The next morning, I watched her leave, all nerves and excitement for her big day. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. By noon, my phone lit up. Texts from mutual friends, shocked and confused, asking what was going on. The boutique's a mess, one said. There are pictures everywhere. Emily called an hour later, her voice shaking. What did you do? She demanded. I played dumb. What are you talking about? She hung up, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. The game had begun. Emily came home that night looking like a ghost had chased her through the streets. Her mascara streaked her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she dropped her bag by the door. I sat on the couch, a glass of whiskey in hand, pretending to scroll through my phone. She didn't say a word at first, just stood there, staring at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. You were at the shop, she finally said, her voice low, accusing. I met her gaze, calm as stone. I don't know what you mean, Em. How was the showcase? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She knew I'd done it. She just didn't know how much further I'd go. The next day, the whispers started. Friends called, awkward and hesitant, asking if we were okay. Saw the pictures, one said. What's going on with you two? I played the wounded husband. Shocked, betrayed, clueless about how those photos ended up plastered around her boutique. Emily didn't leave the house. She locked herself in the guest room, her phone buzzing nonstop. I heard her crying through the walls, muffled sobs that didn't soften me one bit. She'd built this cage. Now she could sit in it. I wasn't done. While she hid, I moved to the next phase. Ryan. I'd learned he had a contract lined up. A big one. Renovating a historic library in his county. It was his golden ticket, the kind of job that could make his business legit. I couldn't let that happen. I spent hours digging, calling in favors from old college buddies who'd landed in high places. One, a county official, owed me for helping him through a messy divorce years back. I fed him a story half-truths about Ryan's shady past, exaggerated claims of cut corners on previous jobs. Just look into him, I said, for the public's sake. He agreed, and I knew the gears were turning. Meanwhile, Emily tried to confront me. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. You're ruining me, she said. You think this fixes anything? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Ruining you? I'm just showing the world who you really are. She flinched like I'd slapped her, then stormed out. I didn't chase her. I had bigger plans. Ryan's contract fell apart a week later. My friend called to say the county had pulled it, citing concerns about reliability. I pictured Ryan's face. Smug grin wiped clean, replaced by panic. Good. But I didn't stop there. I'd found his daughter's social media, a bubbly 16-year-old who posted about cheerleading and her dad's cool truck. I created a burner account, anonymous and untraceable, and sent her a message with one of Paul's photos. Ryan and Emily, tangled up in that motel parking lot. Thought you should know, I wrote. Cruel? Maybe. But fairness had left the building long ago. Emily started to crack. She'd leave the house less. Her boutique shuttered for renovations. Customers stopped calling. Her reputation was ash. One night, she sat me down, her voice brittle. I'll end it with him, she said. I swear, I'll stop. Can we just fix this? I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, and felt nothing but ice. Fix it, I echoed. You think there's anything left to fix? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. You don't get it, Em. This isn't about saving us. It's about balancing the scales. I kept tabs on Ryan through Paul, who'd taken a liking to the job. Guy's a mess, he reported. Lost the contract, fighting with his ex over the kid. She's not taking his calls. I nodded, sipping coffee in that same dingy bar. What's next? Paul asked. I smirked. His business. I want it gone. Paul raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He knew I wasn't bluffing. The boutique stunt had been personal, but I wanted Emily's shame to go wide. I'd collected more than photos, voice recordings from her phone, snatched during late-night hacks when she slept, her laughing with Ryan, whispering things that turned my stomach. I edited them into a montage, her voice clear as day, and uploaded it to a local forum under a throwaway name. Small Town Secrets, I titled it. No faces, no specifics, just enough for the gossips to connect the dots. By morning, it was everywhere, shared on neighborhood apps, texted between PTA moms. Emily's name wasn't in it, but her boutique was, and people knew. She found out at noon. I was in the garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower, when she stormed in, phone in hand. "You're a monster," she hissed, shoving the screen at me. The forum thread glowed, dozens of comments piling up, some pitying, some vicious. "You did this to yourself?" I said, wiping grease off my hands. "You and your contractor." She threw the phone at me, missing by inches, and ran back inside. I didn't flinch. The mower roared to life under my hands, drowning out her sobs. Ryan's turn came next. I'd learned his crew hung out at a bar near his office, a dive called the Rusty Nail. I printed flyers, those same motel photos, his face circled in red, captioned "Homewrecker at Work." I paid a kid $20 to plaster them around the bar's parking lot one Friday night. By Monday, Paul told me Ryan's guys were quitting, muttering about drama and bad vibes. His business was bleeding, and I hadn't even touched the heavy stuff yet. Emily's boutique was her lifeline, but it wasn't cheap to run. I'd been the steady earner, funneling savings into her dream. Now I cut the cord. I met with a lawyer, a shark named Denise who specialized in messy splits. "I want everything protected," I told her. "She gets nothing." Denise grinned, flipping through my evidence. "Oh, honey, she's toast. We froze our joint accounts, rerouted my paychecks to my secret stash." Emily didn't notice until her card declined at the grocery store. She called me furious. "What the hell, Mark?" I shrugged over the phone. "Guess you'll have to ask Ryan for help." For him, I went deeper. His business relied on loans, big ones, tied to that library job. With it gone, he was scrambling. I tipped off his creditors, anonymous emails hinting at instability, late payments I'd fabricated with forged docs. Paul helped, digging up dirt on a past bankruptcy Ryan had buried. The bank called in his notes, and his equipment, trucks, tools, all of it started getting repossessed. I watched from afar, a spectator to his collapse, feeling the first real satisfaction since this began. Emily tried to fight back. She hired her own lawyer, a cheap one she could barely afford, and started throwing around words like harassment and defamation. I laughed when Denise told me. "Let her try," I said. "She's got no ground to stand on." The photos, the recordings, they were my shield, proof of her betrayal. The law wouldn't touch me. Emily moved out a week later, crashing with a friend who hadn't abandoned her yet. She left a note. "You win. I'm done." I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. Winning didn't feel like I'd imagined. It was hollow, a cold echo in an empty house. But I wasn't finished. Ryan was still standing, barely, and I needed him broken too. I tracked him to a job site, a small remodel he'd scraped together. I showed up, casual as anything, and leaned against his truck. He saw me, froze, then marched over, fists clenched. "You her husband?" he growled. I nodded. "You're done, Ryan. Everything you've got, gone." He swung, but I ducked, years of high school boxing kicking in. "Walk away," I said, "or I'll bury you deeper." He glared, chest heaving, then backed off. I'd won that round, but the war wasn't over. With Emily gone, the house felt like a mausoleum, silent, heavy with ghosts of what used to be. I didn't care. My focus sharpened, a blade honed on resentment. She'd taken half her clothes, some books, and a few trinkets, leaving behind the life we'd built. I boxed up the rest, photos, her favorite mugs, the quilt her mom made, and dumped it on her friend's porch. No note, no explanation. Let her figure it out. Word spread fast in our little suburb. Neighbors stopped waving, their smiles replaced by sidelong glances. I'd become the guy who torched his marriage, and Emily somehow the victim. Fine. Let them talk. I had bigger fish to fry. Ryan's world was crumbling, but he still had a few lifelines. Friends, drinking buddies, a couple loyal clients. I went after those next. I'd learned he played poker every Thursday at the Rusty Nail, a ritual with the same crew. I didn't show up myself, that'd be too obvious. Instead, I sent Paul with a stack of those flyers, plus a new twist. Copies of his loan defaults, stamped overdue in red ink I'd faked. Paul slipped them under windshield wipers, tucked them into bar stools. By Friday, Ryan's poker night was down to 2 guys, both looking uneasy. Paul overheard them muttering about bad luck and crazy exes. I grinned when he told me isolation was a slow poison, and I was dosing him good. Emily wasn't faring much better. Her friend's place was temporary. She couldn't afford rent on her own, not with the boutique dead. I heard through the grapevine she'd started waitressing at a diner downtown, a far cry from her artisan dreams. I drove by once just to see. There she was, hair pulled back, apron stained, carrying plates with a blank stare. Our eyes met through the window, and she froze, then turned away. I didn't linger. Seeing her diminished was enough for now. Emily's parents lived an hour away, retirees who'd always treated me like a son. I'd held off involving them, but the game had shifted. I needed her cut off from every anchor. I called her mom, Linda, on a Sunday afternoon, voice steady but laced with hurt. I didn't want to do this, I said. But you deserve to know. I told her everything. Ryan, the motel, the lies, keeping it factual, letting the photos I'd emailed earlier do the heavy lifting. Linda gasped, then went quiet. Mark, we had no idea, she whispered. I didn't ask them to pick sides. I didn't have to. When Emily showed up at their place a week later, begging for a loan, they turned her away. We can't support this, her dad told her. Voice hard over the phone when he called to apologize to me. Another route severed. Ryan's family was trickier. His ex-wife, Tara, already hated him, but their daughter, Sophie, was his weak spot. That photo I'd sent had done its job. She'd stopped talking to him. Her social media posts turning dark and cryptic. I pushed harder. I mailed Tara a packet. More photos, a timeline of his affair, even a forged note suggesting he'd blown child support on Emily. None of it was provable, but it didn't need to be. Tara filed for full custody the next week, citing unstable behavior. Ryan fought it, but his lawyer was a public defender, overworked and outmatched. I watched the court filings online, a silent spectator to his unraveling. Ryan's business was a shell now. Creditors circling, crew gone, jobs dried up. I'd heard he'd started drinking more, showing up late to what little work he had. I decided to finish it. I found his last client, a widow fixing up her porch, and posed as a concerned neighbor. Heard he's been shaky lately, I said over coffee she'd offered me. Might want to check his references. She did. Found the mess I'd seeded. Late payments, angry reviews I'd planted, and fired him that day. His truck got repossessed the next morning, towed right out of his driveway. Paul snapped a photo for me. Ryan standing there, helpless, as it rolled away. I framed it, kept it in my desk drawer. Emily hit bottom around the same time. The diner let her go. Too many missed shifts, they said. She'd been crashing on couches, her pride shredded. I got a call from her one night, voice slurred with wine or desperation. You happy now? She asked. You've taken everything. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. You gave it away first, Em. I just made sure everyone saw. She hung up, and I poured myself a drink. Victory tasted bitter, but I swallowed it anyway. Ryan found me a month later. I was at the hardware store, picking up paint for the house, new colors to erase her presence. He pulled up in a beat-up sedan, all he had left, and got out, face haggard. You, he said, pointing a shaky finger. You did this. I set the cans down, met his glare. You climbed into my life, Ryan. What did you expect? He lunged, but he was slow, sloppy, too much booze, too little fight. I sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted until he yelped. Stay down, I warned, shoving him back, or I'll dig deeper. He slumped against his car, breathing hard, then drove off. I watched him go, feeling nothing but the weight of my own hands. Emily showed up the next day, unannounced. She stood on the porch, thinner than I'd ever seen her, eyes hollow. "I'm leaving," she said. "Out of state. I can't stay here." I nodded, arms crossed. "Good luck." She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, then turned and walked away. I didn't stop her. The door closed behind me, and the silence was deafening. Months passed. The house was mine now, legally and otherwise. Denise had made sure of that. I painted it, sold off Emily's old stuff, turned the guest room into a gym. Life settled into a new rhythm, solitary but steady. I heard through a friend that Emily had landed in Oregon, working some low-end job, cut off from everyone we'd known. Ryan was a ghost, last seen hauling scrap for cash, his name a cautionary tale at the Rusty Nail. Their worlds had imploded, just as I'd planned. I didn't celebrate. Revenge had been a fire, burning hot and fast, but it left ashes, not warmth. I'd won, sure, stripped them bare, made them pay, but the cost was etched in me too. Late at night, I'd sit with that framed photo of Ryan's truck, staring at it like it held answers. Didn't. The scales were balanced, but the weight never lifted. I'd torn down their lives to match the hole they'd carved in mine, and now we were all just shadows, drifting through the wreckage. And that's where it ends. My story, their ruin, a cruel equilibrium I'd forged with my own hands. I'd do it again, I think, but I'd never call it justice.